It was a cold and quiet evening in Washington, D.C. The air smelled of fallen leaves, and the streets were mostly empty except for a few cars passing by. Emma Carter, the deputy director of the CIA, had just finished a long meeting at Langley. She decided to walk back to her car instead of taking a taxi. Walking always helped her clear her mind after stressful days like this one. Emma wore a dark suit that fit her perfectly, making her look both professional and confident. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement as she moved through the dimly lit streets. She liked the sound. It reminded her that she was in control, even when things around her felt chaotic. But tonight, something unusual happened that would shake her sense of calm. As she turned onto a quieter street lined with old brick buildings, two police officers stepped out from behind their patrol car. Their flashlights shone directly into her face, blinding her for a moment. One of them, a tall man with broad shoulders, spoke first. His voice was sharp and full of suspicion. "Ma'am, can you explain what you're doing here so late?" he asked. His name tag read Grayson. The other officer stood slightly behind him, his arms crossed. His badge said Keller. Emma stopped walking and looked at them calmly. She didn't like being questioned this way, but she knew better than to show anger or frustration right away. Instead, she raised an eyebrow and replied coolly, "I could ask you the same question. Is there a problem?" The taller officer, Grayson, glanced at his partner before looking back at Emma. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her skin color and then moving to her expensive-looking suit. It seemed like he was trying to figure out whether she belonged in this neighborhood or not. Finally, he said, "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. Just doing our job." Emma crossed her arms over her chest. She wasn't going to let them intimidate her. Suspicious activity? Like what? Me walking home after work? Her tone was firm but polite. Still, she could tell they weren't convinced. They shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances again. Deciding it was time to end this nonsense, Emma reached into her bag and pulled out her government ID. She held it up so the flashlight beams illuminated the badge clearly. "Does this answer your questions?" she asked, her voice steady. For a split second, the two officers froze. Their faces went pale as they read the words printed on the card. Deputy Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Their mouths opened. Slightly, but no sound came out. Then, almost simultaneously, they began stammering apologies. "Ma'am, we didn't realize," Grayson started, fumbling over his words. "We're so sorry," Keller added quickly, taking a step back. "We were just following protocol." Emma studied them carefully. Normally, she might have accepted their apology and walked away. People often underestimated her because of how she looked, and while it frustrated her, she usually let it slide. But tonight, something about their reaction struck her as strange. It wasn't just embarrassment. They seemed genuinely shocked, almost frightened. "Protocol?" she repeated slowly, tilting her head. "You mean shining flashlights in someone's face and questioning them without cause is standard procedure now?" Grayson swallowed hard. "No, ma'am. Of course not. We made a mistake. Please forgive us." Emma nodded once, though she wasn't satisfied. Something wasn't adding up. Why had they reacted so strongly to seeing her ID? Most people who encountered high-ranking government officials either became nervous or overly respectful, but these two looked like they'd seen a ghost. She tucked her ID back into her bag and gave them a tight smile. "I'll let it go this time, but next time, try to remember that profiling isn't part of anyone's protocol." With that, she turned and continued walking toward her car, leaving the two officers standing there in stunned silence. As she drove home, Emma couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Those men hadn't acted like typical racist cops, not entirely anyway. Sure, they had judged her based on her appearance, but their reaction to her title suggested there was more to the story. What had they expected to find when they stopped? Her? And why had they been so surprised to discover who she really was? By the time she arrived at her apartment, Emma had already decided to look into the matter further. She trusted her instincts, and they were telling her that this wasn't just a random act of prejudice. There was something bigger going on, something she needed to understand. The next morning, Emma arrived at CIA headquarters early. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at her desk, staring at the screen of her computer. She called in her assistant, Lucas Bennett, a young man with a knack for digging up information. He had been working with her for 3 years and knew exactly how her mind worked. "Lucas," she began, leaning back in her chair, "do me a favor and look into Officers Adam Grayson and Ryan Keller. Find out everything you can about them, their precinct, their records, anything unusual." Lucas frowned, sensing the seriousness in her voice. "What happened, Emma?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "They stopped me last night, nothing major, but their behavior was off. I want to know why." Lucas nodded and jotted down the names. "Got it. Anything specific I should focus on?" "Just anything that seems out of place," Emma replied. "And while you're at it, see if there are any ongoing projects involving law enforcement and advanced technology. Something tells me this isn't just about racism." Lucas raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask any more questions. He trusted Emma's judgment and knew better than to push for details unless she offered them. "I'll get started right away," he said, heading back to his desk. Over the next few hours, Emma tried to concentrate on her usual tasks: reviewing intelligence reports, attending briefings, and signing off on various operations. But her mind kept drifting back to the encounter with the officers. She replayed the scene in her head, analyzing every detail. Their body language, their tone of voice, the way they had reacted to her ID, it all pointed to something deeper than simple bias. By mid-afternoon, Lucas returned with some preliminary findings. He closed the door to her office and sat down, across from her. "Okay, so here's what I found," he began. "Both Grayson and Keller are part of a special unit in their precinct. They've been involved in several controversial stops recently, all targeting minorities, but there's more." Emma leaned forward, intrigued. "Go on." "Well, according to some internal memos I managed to access, their unit has been testing new equipment. Officially, it's supposed to be standard-issue gear for identifying suspects. Unofficially—" Lucas paused, flipping through his notes. "There are whispers about neural interfaces, tech designed to scan brain activity or subconscious." "Quiz." Emma sat quietly in her office, staring at the papers Lucas had placed on her desk. The words neural interfaces echoed in her mind. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, not something that should exist in real life. But if what Lucas said was true, then the 2 officers who stopped her weren't just acting on prejudice. They were part of something much bigger and far more dangerous. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a mix of curiosity and concern. Lucas nodded. "I double-checked everything. There are rumors floating around about unauthorized tests involving advanced biometric systems, some kind of tech that scans more than just IDs. It reads brain activity or emotional responses. People are calling it mind profiling." Emma frowned. "Mind profiling? That's not just unethical, it's invasive and illegal." Lucas shrugged. "That's why it's being kept under wraps. Only a handful of precincts have access to it, and even fewer people know it exists. Whoever is running this project clearly doesn't want attention." Emma leaned back in her chair, deep in thought. If such technology was real, it could be used for good, like identifying criminals or preventing crimes before they happened. But, in the wrong hands, it could also become a tool for oppression, targeting innocent people based on flawed algorithms or biased programming. She thought about how Grayson and Keller had reacted when they saw her ID. Was their shock because the system flagged her as a threat? Or was it something else entirely? "I need to talk to someone who knows more about this," Emma said finally. "Someone outside the agency." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Who do you have in mind?" "Dr. Olivia Price," Emma replied without hesitation. "She's one of the top neuroscientists in the country and has worked on similar projects before. If anyone can confirm whether this tech is real, and if it's being misused, it's her." Later that evening, Emma met Olivia at a small cafe near Georgetown University. The place was cozy, with soft lighting and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Olivia arrived a few minutes late, carrying a leather satchel and wearing a gray sweater that made her look approachable, yet professional. "Emma?" Olivia greeted her warmly, sliding into the seat across from her. "It's been a while. What brings you here?" Emma smiled politely but got straight to the point. "I need your expertise," she said. "Have you heard anything about law enforcement? Using neural implants or biometric scanning devices designed to detect threats based on subconscious cues?" Olivia's expression shifted instantly. Gone was the casual friendliness. Now she looked cautious, almost guarded. "Why are you asking?" "About that?" she asked carefully. Emma hesitated for a moment, debating how much to reveal. She decided to stick to the basics. "I had an encounter recently with 2 police officers. They acted strangely when they realized who I am. From what I've gathered, they might have been using some kind of experimental tech during our interaction. Does that sound familiar?" Olivia sighed and leaned back in her chair. "You're treading dangerous ground here, Emma. This isn't just speculation, it's reality. There are programs experimenting with neural interfaces, though most are still in development. Officially, they're supposed to help identify potential threats faster and more accurately. Unofficially..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Unofficially what?" Emma pressed gently. "Unofficially, these systems aren't ready for public use," Olivia admitted. "They're riddled with biases and inaccuracies. If someone is deploying them prematurely and without oversight, it could lead to disaster." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. "Can you give me an example?" Olivia nodded. "Imagine a device that scans your brain activity and flags you as aggressive just because you're nervous. Or worse, imagine it labeling you as a threat based on pre-programmed stereotypes about your race, gender, or socioeconomic status. These systems don't understand context, they only see patterns, and if those patterns are flawed, the results will be too." Emma clenched her jaw. What Olivia described sounded horrifyingly plausible. If the officers who stopped her were using such technology, it explained their bizarre behavior. But why target her specifically? As deputy director of the CIA, she wasn't exactly a random civilian. Whoever was behind this must have known who she was, or at least suspected she'd investigate further. "Is there any way to trace where this tech is coming from?" Emma asked after a pause. Olivia hesitated. "It won't be easy. Most of these projects operate under layers of secrecy. However, if you're looking for answers, start with Nexus Labs. They've been linked to several controversial contracts involving government agencies. Rumor has it they're developing cutting-edge biometric tools, though no one knows exactly what they're working on." "Nexus Labs," Emma repeated, committing the name to memory. "Thank you, Olivia. You've given me a lot to think about." Olivia gave her a concerned look. "Be careful, Emma. If you're right about this, you're dealing with people who won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets in their way." Emma nodded grimly. "I'll keep that in mind." The next day, Emma returned to Langley determined to dig deeper into Nexus Labs. She assembled a small team of trusted agents to assist her, including Lucas and Daniel Harper, a seasoned investigator, known for his sharp instincts. Together, they began piecing together fragments of information about the company. Nexus Labs operated out of a sleek, modern building in downtown D.C., its glass facade reflecting the city's skyline. On paper, it appeared to be a legitimate contractor providing tech solutions for various government departments. But beneath the surface, things didn't add up. For starters, the company had received millions in funding despite having little transparency about its operations. Additionally, several key employees had backgrounds in controversial research fields, including artificial intelligence and behavioral psychology. As Emma reviewed the files spread across her desk, Daniel walked in holding a folder. "We found something interesting," he said, placing it in front of her. A list of incidents where civilians were detained by police units equipped with experimental gear. All of them minorities. None of them charged with anything. Emma opened the folder and scanned the contents. Each entry included details about the individuals involved, names, ages, locations, as well as notes from the officers who detained them. One report caught her eye. A young woman named Maria Lopez had been stopped while walking home from work. According to the officer's account, the system flagged her as high risk due to elevated stress levels detected during the scan. In reality, Maria was simply anxious because she was running late to pick up her son from daycare. This isn't justice, Emma muttered, closing the folder. It's persecution. Daniel nodded. And it's getting worse. These incidents are happening more frequently, and the victims have no idea why they're being targeted. Whatever Nexus Labs is building, it's already causing harm. Emma stood up and paced the room, her mind racing. She knew exposing the truth wouldn't be easy. Companies like Nexus Labs had powerful allies, and the people behind this operation would stop at nothing to protect their interests, but she couldn't let fear hold her back. Too many lives were at stake. Start preparing a plan, she told Daniel. We need to gather concrete evidence, documents, recordings, anything that proves. Nexus Labs is involved in this. Once we have enough, we'll take it to Congress and the media. The world needs to know what's happening. Daniel saluted mockingly. Understood, boss. Let's bring them down. Emma managed a small smile despite the weight of the task ahead. She knew the road wouldn't be smooth, but she was ready to fight. After all, standing up for what was right was what she did best. That night, as Emma drove home, she thought about the people whose lives had been disrupted by this hidden agenda. Maria Lopez, the young mother flagged as a threat. The countless others who had been humiliated, interrogated, or worse, all because of a flawed system designed to control rather than protect. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. Nexus Labs wouldn't get away with this. Not on her watch. The next morning, Emma arrived at CIA headquarters earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the city. She sipped her coffee as she reviewed the latest updates from her team. Daniel and Lucas had spent most of the night gathering more information about Nexus Labs, and their findings painted an increasingly disturbing picture. Okay, Emma said, calling everyone into the conference room. Let's go over what we know so far. Lucas stood, up first, holding a tablet in his hands. Nexus Labs has been receiving massive funding from multiple government agencies, including the Department of Defense and Homeland Security. On paper, they're developing tools for public safety, things like facial recognition software and predictive analytics. But there's no clear record of where all that money is going. Daniel chimed in, pointing to a map displayed on the screen behind him. We've identified several locations where incidents involving neural scanning devices have occurred. Every single one of these places falls under the jurisdiction of precincts linked to Nexus Labs. And here's the kicker. None of the flagged individuals were actual threats. Emma nodded thoughtfully. So they're using innocent people as test, subjects without their knowledge or consent. That explains why Maria Lopez and others were targeted. But why? What's the endgame? Lucas scrolled through his notes before answering. From what I can tell, the data collected during these encounters is being fed into a larger algorithm. It's supposed to predict behavior patterns, essentially who might cause trouble in the future. But the problem is, the system isn't accurate. It's biased, incomplete, and dangerous. Emma leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. And if this tech gets rolled out nationwide, it could ruin countless lives. People would be labeled as threats based on faulty assumptions. We need to stop it before it goes any further. But how? Daniel asked. Nexus Labs has powerful connections. If we move too quickly, they'll cover their tracks. Emma thought for a moment. We'll start by infiltrating their operations. Find someone inside who can give us access to their systems. At the same time, we'll gather evidence to expose them publicly. Once we have proof, we'll take it straight to Congress. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Infiltrate them? That's risky. Who do you suggest we send in? Emma glanced at Daniel with a determined look. You. Daniel didn't argue. He knew Emma wouldn't ask unless she believed he was the best person for the job. Over the next few days, he worked closely with Lucas to create a fake identity. They crafted a backstory for him as a disgruntled former military contractor looking for work. His new name was Alex Carter, a nod to Emma, though neither of them mentioned it aloud. Once everything was ready, Daniel submitted his application to Nexus Labs. To his relief, he received a call within hours inviting him for an interview. The company clearly needed skilled workers, and his fabricated credentials made him stand out. On the day of the interview, Daniel dressed in a plain black suit and drove to Nexus Labs' headquarters. The building looked even more imposing up close, its glass walls reflecting the gray clouds overhead. As he entered the lobby, he felt a mix of excitement and unease. This was it, the first step toward uncovering the truth. A receptionist greeted him warmly and led him to a small meeting room. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and sharp eyes walked in. His badge read, Victor Lang, Chief Operations Officer. Mr. Carter, Victor said, shaking Daniel's hand firmly. Thank you for coming in. Your background caught our attention. Tell me, why did you leave your last position? Daniel kept his expression neutral. I didn't agree with the direction my previous employer was taking. Too much bureaucracy, not enough action. I prefer working for companies that value innovation and results. Victor nodded approvingly. That's exactly what we aim to achieve. Here at Nexus Labs, we're developing cutting-edge technology to enhance public safety. Of course, discretion is key. Much of our work is classified. I understand, Daniel replied smoothly. Confidentiality is second nature to me. The rest of the interview went smoothly. Victor seemed impressed by Daniel's answers and offered him a temporary position starting immediately. Daniel accepted without hesitation, knowing this was his chance to get closer to the heart of the operation. Over the next week, Daniel settled into his role at Nexus Labs. He spent his days attending meetings, reviewing technical documents, and observing the inner workings of the company. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Employees worked diligently, and discussions focused on improving existing systems. But as Daniel dug deeper, he began noticing subtle signs of something darker lurking beneath the surface. One evening, while staying late to catch up on paperwork, Daniel slipped into an unused office and accessed the company's internal network using a device Lucas had provided. It took some time, but eventually, he found what he was looking for, a folder labeled Project Sentinel. Inside were detailed reports about the neural scanning devices being tested in various cities. The documents revealed that the technology was far more advanced and invasive than anyone outside the company realized. Not only could it detect stress levels and emotional responses, but it also attempted to analyze political leanings and social affiliations. Essentially, it was designed to flag anyone deemed anti-establishment as a potential threat. Daniel copied the files onto a secure drive and sent them to Emma. Within hours, she called him. This is worse than we thought, she said, her voice tense. They're not just profiling people, they're creating a system to suppress dissent. If this gets implemented on a large scale, it could silence anyone who questions authority. What do we do now? Daniel asked. We escalate, Emma replied firmly. Keep gathering intel, but don't risk getting caught. Meanwhile, I'll reach out to trusted allies in Congress and the media. We need to prepare for the moment when we go public. Back at Langley, Emma shared the new evidence with her team. Everyone agreed that the stakes were higher than ever. If Nexus Labs succeeded in rolling out Project Sentinel, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power in society. Innocent people would be persecuted, free speech would be stifled, and trust in institutions would erode completely. Emma decided to take matters into her own hands. She contacted Senator Robert Hayes, a longtime advocate for civil liberties and transparency in government. Though they hadn't always seen eye to eye, Emma respected his integrity and knew he'd listen to her concerns. They met in a quiet corner of a local diner, away from prying eyes. After explaining the situation, Emma handed him a flash drive containing the documents Daniel had retrieved. This is explosive, Senator Hayes said after reviewing the files. If even half of this is true, it's a national scandal waiting to happen. It's all true, Emma assured him. And it's happening right now. I need your help to bring this to light. Hayes hesitated. You realize the backlash will be enormous. Powerful people are involved and they won't go down without a fight. I know, Emma said quietly. But doing nothing isn't an option. Too many lives are at stake. After a long pause, Hayes nodded. All right, I'll speak to a few colleagues and arrange a closed-door briefing. But you'll need irrefutable proof to convince everyone. Are you prepared for that? Emma met his gaze steadily. Yes. As the days passed, tension mounted within Emma's team. They continued monitoring Nexus Labs' activities while preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Daniel reported back regularly, providing updates on the company's plans. According to him, Nexus Labs was nearing the final stages of testing and intended to present Project Sentinel to federal officials within weeks. We don't have much time, Emma told her team during one of their late-night strategy sessions. Once they unveil this project officially, it'll be nearly impossible to stop. We need to act fast. Daniel suggested a bold plan. What if I sabotage their presentation, disable the system during the demo, and expose its flaws in front of everyone? Emma shook her head. Too risky. If you're caught, they'll destroy you, and us along with you. No, we stick to the original plan. Gather evidence, leak it to the press, and let the public decide. Everyone agreed reluctantly. They knew the risks, but they also understood the importance of staying disciplined. This wasn't just about stopping Nexus Labs. It was about protecting the principles of justice and equality. Late one night, as Emma sat alone in her office, she reflected on the journey ahead. The road would be difficult, and the consequences of failure unimaginable. But she couldn't turn back now. For every Maria Lopez, for every person unfairly targeted by this oppressive system, she owed it to them to fight. She stared out the window at the city skyline, illuminated by thousands of tiny lights. Somewhere out there, Nexus Labs was plotting to reshape the world in its image. But Emma Carter wasn't afraid. She had faced challenges before, and she would face this one too. With renewed determination, she turned back to her desk and began drafting a statement. When the time came, the world would hear the truth and Nexus Labs would fall. The days turned into weeks and the pressure on Emma's team grew heavier. Each morning began with updates from Daniel, who was still working undercover at Nexus Labs. He reported that the company was racing to finalize Project Sentinel, preparing for a grand unveiling at a high-profile event in Washington, D.C. The presentation would be attended by government officials, corporate leaders, and members of Congress, all eager to see the future of public safety. Emma knew this was their last chance to stop the project before it became unstoppable. If Nexus Labs succeeded in convincing the attendees that Project Sentinel was legitimate, the technology would spread nationwide, and perhaps even globally. The thought of such invasive surveillance being used against innocent people made her blood boil. We need to move faster, Emma told her team during one of their late-night meetings. Daniel's inside, but he can't do everything alone. We need to find another way to disrupt their plans. Lucas leaned forward, his laptop open in front of him. What if we hack into their servers, not just to gather evidence, but to sabotage the system itself? Emma frowned. That's risky. If they trace it back to us, we'll lose everything, including Daniel. But what if no one traces it? Lucas countered. I've been studying their network. There are vulnerabilities we can exploit. If we time it right, we can make it look like an internal glitch, a technical failure during the demo. It'll embarrass them and give us more time to expose the truth. Emma considered the idea carefully. She didn't like taking unnecessary risks, but she also couldn't deny that Lucas's plan had merit. A public failure at the event would buy them precious time to gather more evidence and build a stronger case against Nexus Labs. All right, she said finally. We'll try it, but only as a backup. Our priority is still gathering hard evidence. Daniel needs to keep feeding us information from the inside, and we need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Meanwhile, Daniel continued navigating the treacherous waters of Nexus Labs. He had gained access to restricted areas of the building, where engineers fine-tuned the neural scanning devices. From his observations, he learned that the technology wasn't just flawed, it was intentionally designed to amplify biases. The algorithm prioritized certain demographics over others, ensuring that minorities and marginalized groups were disproportionately flagged as threats. One afternoon, while pretending to review technical specs, Daniel overheard a conversation between two senior engineers. They spoke openly about the upcoming presentation, bragging about how it would secure billions in additional funding. One of them mentioned something called Phase 2, a secretive expansion of the program that involved integrating Project Sentinel into schools, workplaces, and public spaces. Daniel's stomach churned. If Phase 2 went ahead, there would be no escaping the system. Everyone, regardless of age, gender, or background, would be under constant surveillance, judged not by their actions but by assumptions made by a biased machine. He sent an urgent message to Emma later that evening. "They're planning something bigger than we realized. If we don't act now, it'll be too late." Emma read the message and felt her resolve harden. She called Lucas into her office immediately. "We're moving up the timeline," she said. "Start preparing the hack. I want everything ready by tomorrow night." Lucas nodded, though he looked nervous. "Understood. I'll get to work right away." The following evening, tensions ran high. Lucas sat hunched over his computer, typing furiously as lines of code scrolled across the screen. Emma paced behind him, glancing at the clock every few minutes. They had agreed to launch the attack just before midnight, when activity at Nexus Labs would be minimal. At exactly 11:59 p.m., Lucas hit the final key. "It's done," he whispered. "The virus is in their system. It'll disable Project Sentinel during the demo and erase critical data from their servers." Emma let out a slow breath. "Good. Now we wait." The next day, Daniel arrived at Nexus Labs, early, acting as though nothing unusual had happened. He joined a group of employees gathered in the main conference room, where technicians were setting up equipment for a rehearsal of the presentation. Victor Lang stood nearby, barking orders and checking his watch. As the rehearsal began, Daniel watched closely. The engineers powered up the neural scanning device, which emitted a soft hum as it activated. But then, suddenly, the screen displaying its interface flickered and went dark. Alarms blared and red lights flashed throughout the room. "What's going on?" Victor demanded, storming toward the technicians. "It's the system," one of them shouted, frantically pressing buttons on the control panel. "Something's wrong, it won't reboot." Panic spread among the staff as they scrambled to fix the issue. Daniel kept his expression neutral, careful not to draw attention to himself. Inside, however, he felt a surge of satisfaction. The hack had worked. Victor turned pale as he realized the implications. "This can't happen again," he snapped. "Fix it before tomorrow, or we're all dead in the water." Back at CIA headquarters, Emma received confirmation from Lucas that the operation had succeeded. "Their system is down," he reported, "and we wiped enough data to set them back months, if not years." Emma allowed herself a small smile. "Good work. But this isn't over yet. We still need proof to expose them publicly." Later that day, Daniel managed to sneak into a secure archive room at Nexus Labs. Using a hidden camera in his pocket, he photographed stacks of documents detailing the development of Project Sentinel, including emails from executives discussing its intended use for suppressing dissent. He sent the images to Emma immediately. When Emma reviewed the files, her anger reached new heights. The evidence was damning, proof that Nexus Labs knew their technology was flawed and dangerous, yet they pushed forward anyway. With this, she could take the fight directly to the public. She contacted Senator Hayes, who arranged an emergency meeting with a select group of lawmakers and journalists. Emma presented the documents, explaining the full scope of Nexus Labs' operations and the potential consequences of allowing Project Sentinel to proceed. "This isn't about innovation," Emma concluded. "It's about control. If we don't stop them now, freedom as we know it will cease to exist." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed her words. Finally, Senator Hayes spoke. "We'll convene a hearing first thing Monday morning. By the end of the week, the world will know the truth." That night, Emma returned home exhausted but hopeful. For the first time in weeks, She felt like they might actually win, but she knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Nexus Labs wouldn't go down without a fight, and powerful allies would undoubtedly rally to protect the company. Still, Emma refused to back down. She had spent her career fighting for justice, and she wasn't about to stop now. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she would see this through, to the very end. The morning of the hearing arrived, and Washington, D.C. buzzed with anticipation. News outlets had caught wind of the scandal thanks to a carefully timed leak from Senator Hayes' office. Headlines screamed about secret surveillance tech and government overreach and sparking outrage across the country. Protesters gathered outside Capitol Hill, holding signs that read, "Privacy matters," and "No to thought policing." The pressure was mounting on Nexus Labs and its allies. Emma woke up early, her mind racing as she prepared for the day ahead. She dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, choosing something professional but understated. This wasn't about making a fashion statement, it was about presenting herself as credible and trustworthy. Before leaving her apartment, she glanced at her reflection in the mirror and took a deep breath. Today would be one of the most important days of her career. When she arrived at the Senate building, Emma found Senator Hayes waiting for her near the entrance. His usual calm demeanor was tinged with nervous energy. "You ready for this?" he asked, offering her a reassuring smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Emma replied, though her stomach churned with anxiety. She knew what was at stake. If she failed to convince the committee, Nexus Labs might survive the scandal and continue their dangerous work unchecked. Inside the hearing room, cameras flashed as reporters jockeyed for position. Rows of seats filled quickly with lawmakers, activists, and representatives from civil rights organizations. At the center of it all sat a long table where witnesses would testify. Emma took her seat alongside Senator Hayes, placing a folder containing key evidence in front of her. Victor Lang, the chief operations officer of Nexus Labs, sat across from them, flanked by lawyers who looked grimly determined. He glared at Emma, his jaw tight. Clearly, he hadn't expected her to go public so boldly. But Emma refused to meet his gaze. She focused instead on the task at hand. The hearing began with opening statements. Senator Hayes spoke first, outlining the allegations against Nexus Labs. "What we're dealing with here isn't just unethical, it's unconstitutional," he declared. "This technology violates basic human rights, targeting individuals, based on flawed algorithms and biased programming. It must be stopped before it spreads further." Next came Victor Lang's turn to speak. He tried to downplay the accusations, portraying Project Sentinel as a necessary tool for modern law enforcement. "Our goal has always been to protect citizens," he insisted. "Yes, there have been challenges during development, but no system is perfect. We are committed to improving our methods responsibly." Emma listened silently, jotting notes as he spoke. When it was her turn to testify, she stood up, her posture confident despite the weight of the moment. She began by addressing the committee directly. "Senator Hayes is correct. This isn't about protecting citizens, it's about control," she said firmly. "Project Sentinel doesn't just identify threats, it creates them. It targets people not because of what they've done, but because of who they are, or what the algorithm assumes they might become." She opened the folder and held up a document. This email chain shows executives discussing how to suppress dissent using this technology. They talk about labeling political activists, journalists, and community organizers as high risk. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a deliberate strategy. Gasps rippled through the room as Emma displayed more evidence. Photos of the neural scanning devices, internal memos detailing Phase 2, and reports of innocent civilians flagged as threats. Each piece painted a clearer picture of Nexus Labs' true intentions. Victor Lang shifted uncomfortably in his seat, whispering urgently to his lawyers. One of them stood up to challenge Emma's claims. "Ms. Carter, you accuse us of malicious intent without proof," he argued. "These documents could easily be taken out of context." Emma didn't flinch. "Then explain why your company erased critical data from its servers shortly before this hearing, or why your engineers admitted to designing the system to amplify Existing biases, you can't hide behind denials anymore. The truth is right here. Her words silenced the room. Even Victor Lang seemed unable to respond. For the first time, cracks appeared in Nexus Labs' polished facade. As the hearing progressed, other witnesses came forward to share their experiences. Maria Lopez, the young mother who had been detained after being flagged by the system, recounted how humiliating and frightening the encounter had been. Her voice trembled with emotion as she described being separated from her son for hours while officers interrogated her. "I did nothing wrong," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But because of this machine, I was treated like a criminal. My son still asks me why those men stopped me. How do I explain that to him?" Her testimony struck a chord with everyone present. Lawmakers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the human cost of Nexus Labs' actions. Activists nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears of their own. Emma felt a surge of pride knowing they were finally hearing the voices of those affected. By the end of the day, the tide had turned decisively against Nexus Labs. Senator Hayes announced plans to introduce legislation banning the use of invasive biometric technologies until stricter regulations could be implemented. Other lawmakers vowed to investigate similar programs nationwide, ensuring no company could operate in secret again. Outside the hearing room, reporters swarmed Emma, eager for comments. She kept her responses brief but impactful. "This isn't just about stopping one company," she told them. "It's about protecting our freedoms and holding powerful institutions accountable. We owe it to the people who've suffered under these systems to make sure they never happen again." Later that evening, Emma returned to her office, exhausted but satisfied. Lucas greeted her with a wide grin. "You did it," he said. "Nexus Labs is finished." Emma shook her head modestly. "Not yet. There's still cleanup to do, but today was a good start." Despite the victory, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't truly over. Powerful interests wouldn't give up so easily, and Nexus Labs likely had allies willing to shield them from accountability. Still, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. They had exposed the truth, rallied public support, and forced lawmakers to take action. That was progress. As she packed up her things to leave, Daniel called her. "Just wanted to say thanks," he said, "for believing in me, and for standing up when it mattered most." Emma smiled softly. "We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for risking everything to help." After hanging up, she stared out the window at the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, reminding her of the countless lives touched by this battle. Some victories were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. And Emma knew she'd made the right choice. With renewed determination, she grabbed her coat and headed home, ready to face whatever came next. In the weeks following the hearing, the fallout from Nexus Labs' scandal dominated headlines across the nation. The company's stock plummeted as investors fled, and several high-profile executives resigned amid mounting scrutiny. Federal agencies launched investigations into their contracts, uncovering evidence of corruption and misuse of taxpayer money. For the first time in years, it seemed like accountability might actually prevail. Emma Carter watched the developments closely, though she didn't let herself relax just yet. She knew better than to assume the fight was over. Powerful forces still lurked in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. But for now, the tide had shifted in their favor, and that gave her hope. One evening, Emma sat at her desk reviewing updates from her team. Lucas walked in carrying a stack of papers. "The Senate passed the biometric regulation bill today," he announced with a grin. "It's heading to the president's desk for approval." Emma looked up, surprised but pleased. "That was fast." "People are angry," Lucas explained. "After everything that came out about Nexus Labs, no one wants to risk another fiasco like this. Even some of their allies in Congress have distanced themselves." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Good. Let's make sure we stay on top of enforcement once it becomes law. Regulations mean nothing if they're not enforced." Lucas agreed and handed her the rest of the documents. Among them was a report detailing arrests made in connection with Project Sentinel. Several mid-level employees from Nexus Labs had been taken into custody, including Victor Lang. His smug confidence had vanished during questioning, replaced by desperation, as investigators uncovered more evidence against him. "He's singing like a canary," Lucas said with satisfaction. "Turns out he wasn't the mastermind behind all this. He was just following orders." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Orders from who?" "That's what everyone's trying to figure out," Lucas replied. "But there are whispers about a shadowy group funding Nexus Labs, a coalition of private corporations and government agencies working together off the books." Emma frowned. "If that's true, dismantling Nexus Labs won't be enough. We'll need to expose whoever's pulling the strings." Meanwhile, Daniel Harper returned to his regular duties after being officially cleared of any involvement with Nexus Labs. Though relieved to leave his undercover role behind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger remained hidden. He met Emma for coffee one afternoon, eager to share his thoughts. "I've been going through the files I copied," Daniel said, stirring sugar into his cup. "There's mention of a project called Eclipse. It's vague, but it seems connected to Phase 2 of Project Sentinel." Emma leaned forward, intrigued. "What does it say?" "Not much. Just code names and references to expanding surveillance beyond cities, to rural areas, schools, even online platforms. Whoever's behind Eclipse wants total control." Emma sighed deeply. "This isn't just about Nexus Labs anymore. It's part of a larger pattern. If we don't act, they'll find new ways to push their agenda." Daniel nodded grimly. "So, what's the plan?" "For now, we keep gathering intel," Emma said firmly. "We've dealt a blow to Nexus Labs, but we can't afford to stop here. We need to shine a light on every corner of this operation until there's nowhere left for them to hide." Back at CIA headquarters, Emma assembled her team to discuss next steps. They reviewed everything they'd learned so far, piecing together fragments of information about Eclipse. One name kept appearing in connection with the mysterious project: Charles Whitman, a wealthy tech mogul known for his ties to defense contractors and intelligence agencies. "Whitman's fingerprints are all over this," Lucas said, pointing to a photo of the man on the screen. "He's funded countless controversial projects under the guise of philanthropy. If anyone's orchestrating Eclipse, it's him." Emma studied the image carefully. Charles Whitman was charismatic and well-connected, with a reputation for manipulating systems to serve his interests. Taking him down wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. "We'll need hard evidence," Emma said, "something undeniable that links him directly to Eclipse. Until then, we proceed cautiously." Over the next few weeks, Emma's team worked tirelessly to build a case against Whitman. They tracked financial transactions, intercepted communications, and interviewed former employees of companies linked to him. Slowly but surely, the pieces began falling into place. One breakthrough came when Daniel discovered encrypted emails between Whitman and a senior official at the Department of Defense. The messages outlined plans to deploy Eclipse nationwide within 2 years, using Nexus Labs as a testing ground. With Lucas's help, Daniel decrypted the files and forwarded them to Emma. "This is it," Emma said, reviewing the documents late one night. "This proves Whitman's involvement, and implicates others in government willing to look the other way." She decided to take the evidence straight to Senator Hayes. Together, they drafted a detailed report exposing Whitman's role in Eclipse and presented it to key members of Congress. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Calls for Whitman's arrest echoed through Capitol Hill, and federal agents began raiding his properties. As the investigation unfolded, public outrage reached a fever pitch. Protesters demanded justice not only for victims of Project Sentinel, but also for systemic abuses of power. Civil rights organizations seized the moment to push for broader reforms, calling for transparency and accountability in both public and private sectors. For Emma, seeing the movement grow was deeply rewarding. She had always believed in the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it meant risking everything. Now she saw firsthand how collective action could drive change. One evening, as she walked home from work, Emma stopped near the Lincoln Memorial. The monument stood tall against the night sky, its marble facade glowing softly under floodlights. Tourists milled about, snapping photos and sharing stories. Emma found herself smiling faintly as she observed the scene. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You did good, you know." She turned to see Daniel standing beside her, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "Thanks," she replied quietly. "But this isn't about me, or us. It's about everyone who's suffered because of systems like these. All we did was give them a chance to fight back." Daniel nodded. "And sometimes that's enough." They stood there for a while, watching the city stretch out before them. Despite the challenges ahead, Emma felt a sense of peace. The battle against Nexus Labs had taught her that even the most entrenched injustices could be challenged and overcome with courage, determination, and unity. As she finally turned to leave, Emma reminded herself of one thing. The fight for justice never truly ended. There would always be new threats, new battles to face. But for now, she allowed herself a small measure of pride. They had won this round, and they were ready for whatever came next.